In that particular venture, we're giving them access to capital. That's the priority. Is and we're also there's a package where you could have us set up your business. So email, phone number, website, making sure that it's optimized to on Google and all those other things. And then once we've done that, and we've made your business fundable, we then go in and submit the applications and get you approved. So at the end of it, you start with your business, but then you leave with the business that's set up for future funding, and you've already got the first 1 or 2 lines of credit already.
Okay, so just like that in the Bahamas and all these things work is essentially it's a turnkey thing. I come to you,
Yep.
you set up everything for me, everything from shell
Yep.
companies to certificates to bank accounts, etc. That's essentially one of the ways that you can position yourself for the everyday person, or at least the person who wants to charge forward and do something.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
personally, that's one of the things I get giddy about when I see the way you're setting this up. Is I'm essentially looking at like, oh, like just like those companies in Panama, Cyprus, Bahamas, where rich and wealthy people go and say, hey, do everything for me. You're basically kind of setting up a similar thing, and just the difference is that you're saying, hey, you don't have to be this super wealthy person. You can get access to it right now.
Exactly.
So, okay, now as you were testing out creating content, obviously I know it's, you now know, okay, it's not everything I thought it was going to be. So far, conversational style is what you discovered works for you,
Yeah.
right? You've also discovered that you don't even need to prepare, which, by the way, that is something good because a lot of people are like, what do I talk about? Remember, you
Yeah.
stuck to the 3 things that you could not shut up about. And what are those 3 things you can never shut up about?
Business credit, financial literacy, and I would say the last one. It's kind of to figure out sort of how we talked about the last one, but it's
hmm
basically in that same space of just like helping people make decisions for their business.
Okay, and that's good because, by the way, just to reiterate again, that third
Hmm.
point might fluctuate from time to time. It's okay,
Yeah.
but the foundation of your brand is going to remain the same. It's going to remain business funding
Yep.
and financial literacy. That third one, you could turn around tomorrow and put like, I don't know, blow up balloons. It doesn't change. What are some of the things that you would like to try when it comes to the outreach, or at least the delivering to the customer experience?
I want to be able to send people because I want to kind of also have those stories um highlighted as well, because I think that those drive home the purpose. So I want to kind of be able to see, okay, we're producing this content in order to drive people here. When we drive
hmm
people here, this is how we want them to engage, and eventually this is how we want them to buy.
Okay, now when it comes to the production of the content, remember, I know that one person right now is currently working on Legion, right? But in
Hmm.
terms of the customer experience, and think of like in terms of your content strategy, one of the cool things that you can test out for the next week or so is, instead of you sitting there saying, all right, shit, I need to produce and create content,
Hmm.
you could take the strategy of, let me create an outreach, as in leverage other people who are currently making content. For example, your conversation with me is you leveraging that exact practice. So, for example,
Hmm.
the podcast you did before with the dude on your Instagram page,
Yes.
yeah, imagine if you told yourself, every week I'm going to talk to Kat, and every week or every other week I'm going to aim to get myself on a podcast. I'm going to aim to get myself a collaborative conversation with so and so, and you give
Yep.
yourself that. And dude, you no longer have to worry about content ever, because
Yes.
if that's your calendar, it'll be on a rotation. Sean yesterday was just on a podcast. And
Yep.
why? Because we tested out, hey, let's practice getting you on a podcast every single month. That's 12 pieces of content that I can then turn evergreen.
Perfect. And I've been getting requests to do podcasts. I just have to follow up with, like, how people are, hey, be on my podcast. And then like it turns around and doesn't turn into anything.
hmm
So I definitely can see that being the best way to do it. And I'm actually
So let's talk
um
about that. Let's talk about that. So let's say you get requests. How many requests do you have right now? Do you have 1, 2, 5, 17?
I would say right now I've got like 3 in the queue.
Okay, beautiful. So let's take those 3. And you know how I feel about threes. So what are the
Hmm.
3 things you never shut up about? Well, you
Uh
extract that list, and you're like, oh, thank you so much for the invitation. By the way, you can write this down. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is exactly how Sean and I, and even Rich talked, and all of us are approaching this. Thank you so much for the invitation. Here are the top topics that I always go on about, or however you want to word that, of course, in your own words. These are the
hmm.
things that I concentrate, and I'm the go-to source for this. You list out those 3 things. And then, of course, you already are going to have an idea about them. You can actually say, oh, look, I find that this topic is very similar to this podcast episode. Basically, with them, you have to do some of the lifting beforehand.
Right.
And it's a fair trade. It's reciprocity because they're going to produce, they're going to edit, they're going to amplify and promote. So that, on your end, you could definitely say, here are the three things I've got that I always talk about, and it matches up with this episode, that episode, that episode. When would you
Yes.
like to schedule it for?
Yes.
And then for you, whatever's realistic, you can even go ahead in those three and schedule them every other week. So for the next month and a half, you've got three scheduled. So between them and myself, you've got one piece of content every week. And with them, you've got one piece of content every other week. Look what you just did.
Yeah.
So that is something you can try literally as soon as we get off of this call.
Yeah. No, I'm on it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dig more. So that's one thing on the content side. Now on the delivery side, if there's anything that I get super passionate about is the delivery once they're in the door, the customer experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right now you've discovered that what you love is very similar to what we're doing here, and even how we and I work, where we are one-on-one, we are more like personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to that, you discovered that is your style. Of course, that cannot scale, which is okay. You don't need to scale everything because you could doesn't mean
Right.
you should.
Right.
Now, excuse me. Now with that, I just want to give you preface because I've been in your shoes before. Because it cannot scale, what can scale is the price. So if
Mm-hmm.
you give yourself a good enough price in the beginning where it's accessible, obviously you can go up. So at the current moment, what price did you decide on for that?
So when we say, I'll kind of talk about pricing. So somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 as sort of like an entry level. I can give you the tools and kind of walk you through a little bit of how to get you access to the first couple of business lines of credit and to make you fundable for the future.
Okay, now let's
Um,
talk about the customer experience there.
mhm.
Let's extract that because we can blow past that, but let's extract it because the whole focus is making you better, different,
Yeah.
creating, not competing.
Hmm.
So the $2,000, when does that get paid?
You would pay, preferably you'd pay it all up front.
Of course, but as you know, life is life. COVID is
Hmm.
COVID.
Yep.
What are the options you could purvey to someone given that price tag one, the value that you're going to deliver, and so forth? What are some ways that you can get that $2,000?
We could do payments. So you could do like an upfront payment of $500,
Mm-hmm.
plus another $500 the next month. So after 30 days, and then the remaining balance will be paid using the lines of credits we get you approved for.
There you go. So now you see, let's take that offer and dissect it even further then. So what you're telling me, and at least what I'm hearing is, for $500, I can start in about 3 months. You'll help me get funding.
Yes.
But you see now how that changes the dynamic, that changes the offer.
Yep.
Put yourself, I want you to imagine your service as the Ritz Carlton, and you've got a
Hmm.
concierge with white glove service. So that's one of the ways that you can explore how you position this offer. Because somebody saying, oh, 2,000, they're never going to get that number out of their brain. They're
Right.
not. They're just not. It's funny because like one of the things that I joked about was when I had my pizzeria, I made more money on the slices than I did on pies.
Yeah.
And the same principle applies here. If you
Yeah.
remind them, hey, look, I know it sounds like a daunting number, but it's actually only 500 to get started.
Yep.
And usually, the way you operate, by month two, you've already got some things going, right? So you're showing some progress. So maybe
Yeah.
the $500 doesn't hurt anymore to give you. And then by the end
Exactly.
of the third month, you've already gotten some funding, etc. You can now take that. So the offer has paid for itself.
Yes.
I want you to remember that, by the way, because you're in the finance game, so I know that you're numbers, logic, etc. But
Hmm.
please always keep in mind that there's an emotional investment on the customer's end, always. That never
Yeah.
changes. To you, it's dollars and figures, but to them, it's emotional. Just like the way you get emotionally attached to your brand, they get
Yep.
emotionally attached to their money.
Yeah. Good point.
So I mean, like I know we could blaze past that and keep moving, but there's those little things are gonna make all the difference, man. They really are.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that down pat. That's something you can test out. Sure, like let's move forward. So you've got your
Hmm.
content, you've got your
Hmm.
pricing, and
Hmm.
now let's talk about your onboarding. Let's close on that note. The onboarding. When I sign up, what am I greeted with? Who am I greeted by? What's going on?
That's a good question. So, I would say right now, I would need someone to kind of like manage the onboarding process. So
Why?
you're being, because I would want them to kind of like, well, really, the onboarding process really starts with the initial meeting and the sales process. Because I would need all of their information before I can do anything effective. So like, you'd have to fill out this form and get me this paperwork.
Hmm.
um, Once you fill out this form and got me this paperwork, then we would have a conversation about goals. You would make your first payment, and then I go back based on your goals and I try to execute your plan. Um, and then it's going to require some, hey, we're submitting this application. Hey, you got like, you kind of go through that process of like getting approved. And then from there, you pretty much should be done within 30 days.
Sweet. Oh, actually, you just reminded me. So their onboarding process is they get greeted by someone. You go charge forward. So from me beginning the process to me actually getting started, how much time has elapsed?
Probably I'd need a bunch of documents I'd need a couple documents from you and for you to fill out a form, an initial meeting, so I would give that like a week.
A week. Now, is there anyone else there out there right now doing the same thing?
Doing this process, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
couple people doing something similar.
Okay. And how much time do they currently take from inception to start?
I I would say it's a similar like the process is similar, so I would say the time is similar.
Okay, so they
Um,
also take a week.
theirs is a little bit quicker because it's like you do everything in the first step. So what they do is they drive traffic to the website, and on the website you fill out the application, submit the paperwork, and then you're contacted. On that
Hmm.
contact call, you're closed. And then from there it's that same like month before you actually see the funding. So there's this like it would be a similar amount of time. I would say it's the same week.
Okay. Now, is their target audience different from yours?
No, we're pretty much compete. I wouldn't say it's the same target audience,
Hmm.
because they're not offering the same products. They're not offering the same solutions.
Hmm.
Um, so their target audience would be more so a person who wants to learn business credit from them, go through the process themselves,
Hmm.
and get like vendor
Ah,
credit.
there you go.
Um,
The do it yourself. So they're the
the
do
do
it
it
yourself
yourself,
route.
right?
Okay, now let's put a pin in that one because we're closing off on that section. That's something important. I'm glad the fact that you're also now your verbiage has changed too.
Hmm.
You're not competing with them. They're going for the DIY crowd, the do it yourself crowd. You're going for the crowd that would like to learn so that they can keep
Hmm.
doing it
Hmm.
way well past your time together. And you're more of a concierge sort of approach where you're like, hey, look, it's going to be one on one. It's going to be more personal, and there's going to be some hand holding here.
Yeah.
So your demographic would change. They're going
Yep.
for the DIY crowd, so their crowd is going to tend to be very either control freaks or have a crazy amount of free time. Your
Hmm.
crowd is going to be more like I don't have an abundance of time. I don't have a shit ton of patience. I probably don't even have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So I want you to remember those three things because that's going to go into your messaging.
Good
Remember
point.
what I told you before?
Yeah.
When you create a piece of content, when you go on a podcast, when you create something, you never talk to a crowd. You're talking to one person. In fact, even now, when I write my newsletter, I literally have at the top of my newsletter, who am I talking to? And I have a picture of someone for that week and have their name. That's just me.
Yes.
That's just me. This is my style. You don't have to emulate that, but if it works for you, run with it and make it your own. Literally, take that. You can take my theory and just make it your own. But
Yes.
you notice when you did the live, you did that. You talked to your
Hmm.
cousin, and then it
Yep.
was way more personal. You even said, "You're like, yo, I was getting DM responses."
Yes.
That's why, because as technology has gotten cooler and better, for some reason, advertising has gotten worse. And
Yeah.
it's good that we inject ourselves because that way we aren't talking to ourselves. Sure, maybe we might get less customers than like Apple or IBM or these
Hmm.
big companies, but I'd rather have 1,000 really fucking dope ass people than 10,000 just passerbys.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, how do you feel about that?
I like that idea.